My name is Sebastian, and in this video I'm going to show you 13 cool and helpful IntelliJ features that you probably don't know yet. So this is not about the usual stuff like your usual code completion or your keyboard shortcuts. Well, there are some, but this is more about the features that are lesser known and sometimes surprising that we have this, and definitely helpful. So to start it out with, I want to show something that is actually a completion, but it's called Hippie Completion. So what is that? The ones amongst you who know Vim, this is very similar to what you can do with Control P. So if I type something here and I'm not in code, let's say I'm in a string, for example. So if I would try to autocomplete some class here, usually, well, it does work if you press it multiple times or if you do the control space, because that's a class. But other than that, it would not complete it. Hippie completion is alt slash. With this, you can cycle and autocomplete the words that are currently open in your file here, or actually in all of the open editor tabs. So for example, if I type some longer words here, and this is really helpful when doing technical writing. I use this a lot actually when doing technical writing. For example, I can write any word. So this doesn't have to match any Java code, any current context. It's just about the strings. I can say, for example, do the completion for the architecture, enterprise software. You see it cycles through the available words, and this is really helpful when you want to do any sort of writing here, especially technical writing. Or it's good to know that you say, okay, you can just actually complete any word. It will also highlight for what it actually just completed. So again, this is not a Java completion. This would not make sense in the context. It's just about what you have open here. If I have multiple tabs open, then it would also, for example, autocomplete this hello resource. It wouldn't if I'm here and then I try to do this. Now the AI is trying to take over, but if I press alt slash, it only works for what is currently open here in the editor. So that's the first thing, Hippie completion, alt slash, for completing some of these strings. The next thing that you probably know, I hope you know it, and if not, then you're welcome. This is very similar to live templates and is called a postfix completion. So a completion of when you already were typing some code and then you're invoking something afterwards, usually with a dot, that actually would be a wrapper or comes before your code. So that sounds weird, but what do I mean? Something like you have a string hello, and then we say hello world or something like that. And then hello, for example, if I want to check for null, then I would now need to jump back and say if that is not null, for example. Or I say not null. And this is now the postfix completion, very similar to live templates, and we expand it with tab, and then it wraps it. Of course, you can define your own ones. So the null, not null checks are the typical one, or I say something like, please print this, system out print line. So you see what I've done there. It's basically this postfix notation of printing it or printing the variable here. And this is very helpful because especially as I'm typing, we continue to type and then very often we get the notation, oh, now it needs to jump before again. And you know, if you use Vim, that's quite quick, but well, still it is just better for the flow if we can continue typing and you type it sort of afterwards and then it wraps the code as it should be. So that's pretty cool. Postfix completion, check them out in the settings. And of course, as always, you should check them out and think if you can define your own ones. I've done this, for example, for test asserts and things like that, or for method calls. You can even do some project specific things that you keep typing all over again. This is really helpful. All right. Now for the next feature that is also somewhat known, but maybe not in its entirety, that are quick lookups in general. And this is just the idea that I'm coding here and I have my window in front of me and I don't want to switch the context too much. I basically want to stay in that current code file and just have a very quick tooltip lookup of what I'm trying to do. So for example, if I say I would like to invoke something here, a system.out.println, and then I want to see which method arguments or which overloaded methods of this print line are available, and you can do this with Control P. So that basically shows you the parameter info of what is available here. So you see that, or if I'm already invoking something, then you see, okay, let's go back. What is that actually? This is here. You see the highlight of the string and also what is available there. That's Control P for parameter info. If you want to have some more interesting type info, you can press Control Shift P. So then you can even, if it's not, if it's ambiguous, you can select what you mean, and that's a string. Of course, that's kind of boring because you see it there, but imagine this is somewhere up there, you don't have the code available, and you just quickly want to know, okay, what is that? Control Shift P, that's a string. And if you want to know even more about it with some statically analyzed data, you can press it twice, Control Shift P, and then you see even there's a value hello world. So that's kind of cool when we say we do some analysis of, for example, start with a substring here, and then let's do this here, press it twice, and then it already has the correct, well, substring evaluation, and it shows you what this would be in this regard. So it can be helpful, especially if we have longer methods and you lost track of what types and whatnot you have. Control Shift P for that data. Similarly, let's go back here. You can press Control Q for a quick documentation, which is usually the Java doc. So for example, if I want to say, okay, what does this method do? It already tells you here by pressing Control Q, which is basically the method signature plus Javadoc if we have some, and then you can see that. Also, of course, works with any other class or things like that. So here, if you have fields that also has some Javadoc, that's just pretty helpful. We can see, okay, that is also sort of like a quick definition. Speaking of which, there is a feature called Quick Definition, which is Control Shift I, that gives you, now the font size showing us this, a quick definition not for the Javadoc, but for the actual code. So that is pretty much like opening up this. If I would open this up in a code file, I also use this feature obviously a lot that follows the identifier with Control B. If I don't want this, if I don't want to switch that context, what I mentioned earlier, Control Shift I, it just shows you the code here. Also, of course, works with classes and things like that, or fields, whatever have we. It just shows you this in a tooltip. You can close it again with escape, and there you go. It's just a cool feature, all these quick lookups for staying in the current context and just using these features and shortcuts to show you some information without jumping around. That's basically the nice idea. Okay, something else. Another cool feature that you might also know about is, well, what is called language injections. That means in a current code file with a certain language, for example, Java, or might also be HTML, I can inject another language, and then I get the code completion and syntax highlighting and all of that here in my IDE. So with most of the front-end technologies, this works just out of the box because then IntelliJ detects them. But for example, if I say I have something like a JSON string here, which then should be a JSON, I say hello, let's do a proper JSON, hello world. You see, I just can type something and there is no real support. Well, unless I actually say either I use my typical Alt-Enter feature and say, okay, can I actually inject the language? So you can use this feature. Or, and it will even tell you if you do this, I place a comment here and I say language equals, in my case, JSON. So then it will also already do this. And you see now the syntax highlighting, and it will actually, well, highlight something. And I can do this. Now there's still an error because I need to close that object and things like that. And that's really nice. I can also edit this in a fragment, which is kind of cool. And then I can use here some other features. For example, what's really nice, I can then say, hello foobar false. For example, I can say and format this, Control-Alt-L, and then it already formats it. This is especially helpful in JDK text blocks. And then I have this, let's close that editor. I have this available here for my string. So of course also works with other languages. Let's do a text block with XML. So let's say I have this available with, for example, some feature where I say my HTML or XML should be a body and 3 divs. So you see this is, for example, the emit feature that is also included in IntelliJ, but here works because of the language injection, because now I'm dealing with this in an editor, and then again I can format, well, this just formatted the Java. If I want to format it inside, ideally I go into the editor and say, okay, please format this accordingly, what I have here, and then I have something available that is just pretty helpful. So especially the language injections here in, well, whatever code you have, can be your Java code, then you can inject another language and use it as such, see the highlighting and see some potential syntax errors and things like that. So also a quite helpful feature. Maybe you have seen the highlighting, but also that you can use it as such and code in it really like in another code file. So I think that's kind of cool. Another feature that is helpful, well, especially for people like me who are not native speakers for English, but also for actually pretty much everybody who writes in not only English, but who writes in any language, is spell checking. And this also sounds a little bit like, Captain Obvious. Well, we have a spell checking. This is not that much of a cool feature. But I disagree, because especially when we're sometimes not that sure with the spelling and or the grammar, this can just be a helpful feature. So for example, if you say, hello world, and I do a typo here, my name is this and that, it will underline this word and tell you, okay, either fix the typo, or if it's a common word, for example, it's a name in your project, save it to a dictionary. And I'm not quite sure why I didn't pick up this one. And I really use this as such. And for me, it is also a visual highlight if some word is highlighted. So I really try to fix it. Why? Because otherwise, if you have a code file with these underlined words everywhere, so you stop paying attention to it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would rather say, okay, go through them, and if it's actually a proper word, like, my project is called whatever, this, and then say, okay, if that is a proper word name, or if that's a reasonable name, if this wasn't a typo, then actually save it to a dictionary, and this works quite well. And then I pretty much try to remove this occurrence and say, okay, otherwise fix all of these typos. It also works with basic grammar understanding, with where to put the comma and things like that, if you forget about articles. So it's really helpful, and I really advise you to sort of look into this feature. It should be active by default. And get a better understanding what you write into your code files, and especially as developers, it looks more professional if also our comments are just properly typed. Or if you have some identifier names, if I make some typo here, it should, I'm not quite sure about the shorter names, could be an abbreviation. It should also underline then this, where you say, okay, please fix it. So that's that. Really helpful feature. I really advise you to sort of take this seriously, add it to the dictionary. You can download multiple languages. It works also really well with other languages. I've done that. So that's a cool feature and one to pay attention to. What is also really important, probably you know it, but it helped me many, many times. Actually, it saved me many times. That is, let me just fix this because it annoys me. That is the local history. If you go to the local history here, it will show you the history of this particular class regardless of what you have in your Git. So this is not the Git history, it's basically just the changes that you do in your editor, or also local changes if some process updates your files. And sometimes if we just mess up and say, okay, I know for some reason I did a Git checkout and it overrode all of my changes here, then you can go chances are that these changes are in your local history, and you can see what we did here, and we say, okay, this language text block from before was actually pretty cool. Let's try to find this again, where it was somewhere here, and then we should have a look at it. Actually, I'm thinking if that is still there, if it saved all of these changes, because they were quite quick. But this, for example, with my comment, we could still find out. So that's really helpful. Saved me a few times local history feature, especially for just checking out the history. You can see this here. You can see it also for a selection, but basically what I'm mostly doing is showing the history for a file, and then sometimes I can say, okay, please revert to that particular version. Local history, very important feature. Some other features that are helpful, especially for trying out things, prototyping things. Sometimes I add just some main method in some random class because thanks to Java this works. But if you don't want to do this and clutter your code, what you can do are one of two things. One is the JShell integration. If you open up, I'm pretty sure you know about that feature, Shift, sort of find anything or find action. I think Control-Shift-A or something like that, where you can say, go to the JShell console. Then it will open up this particular console that now has a JShell interpretation of your code. If, for example, we say, I can just define, this is not full Java syntax everywhere. It is sort of like a superset here. I can just define a string and then press Shift-Enter. And then you see that it will just display what that is. So for example, if I say substring this, Control-Enter, and then it will have some evaluation of whatever you would like to do. So if I say I do something with the string here, let's define a string, and so on and so forth, I can just use this and say I want to try out things. So what happens if I say, please give me the chars as a stream, and then do something with the stream, and so on and so forth. So for prototyping and trying out stuff and just evaluating in an REPL shell fashion, this is really helpful. Of course, you could start up JShell in your console, but just the fact that it's integrated in your IDE with the syntax highlighting is just pretty cool. Another alternative to that is what is called a scratch file. So if I say, I go to scratches and consoles, or I say add a new scratch file for Java, for example. This will just add, this and not add it to my project. Well, not per se, it is here under scratches and consoles. So I say, okay, please do my usual stuff here. And then I have my hello string, for example, which I then can just print and things like that. I can run this as usual, and things just work. So this is just really helpful if I want to prototype stuff without cluttering my project, JShell integration or scratch files. What is also really cool, another feature that you might have seen somewhere if you want to or have to use regexes, something like this, pattern compile. Let's say I have a regex, something like A to Z. It should start, or it must start with a lowercase letter, and then something like this. So that's now my pattern. Then I can say, okay, what actually matches this regex? Well, this is sort of still simple to figure out. I can go there and say, okay, of course, Alt-Enter, check regex. So then it actually will check this, what matches. So if I say, okay, hello, 1 to 3 matches. Why? Because here you see it's not a full match, it's a partial match. If I want to do this for a full match from beginning to the end of the string or of the line here, then now you see it does not match anymore. I have to type hello 1 to 3. One hello 1 to 3 also does not match, and so this is just how you can try out then your regex, which word matches here just by trying out things by playing around. So regex editor or regex checker is really helpful. You see also that there's a syntax highlighting for your regex, so it understands the context here that this string is actually a regex in Java. So regex checker, also a cool and helpful feature. Another feature that it's probably not widely used, it is very powerful, and I don't know if you've seen this, that is a search and replace, but search structurally. So if you do a search, then it is always, well, text-based. So for example, if I go here and say, okay, please search everything, Control-Shift-F, find in files, and I say something like my coffee shop, then of course it finds all of these classes with the occurrences, but basically, well, based by string. So if I search for something like hello, that is part of a string, it also finds it, of course. Now, if I say I want to search in a more structural way, especially if I plan a migration, or if I say, well, which classes actually have this particular code structure, like certain structures, especially in our Java code, then this search structurally can help you a lot. And this is a quite powerful feature. If we say find structurally, or search structurally, then what it will do, it will give you a quite complex editor where you say, okay, I would like to search for a class. Okay, this is quite simple. Or I say I want to search for, well, a deprecated method, something like this. Or here you see, you know, things that might be interesting. And then what you can do, of course, you can write your own search. So what I prepared here is, for example, in the Java Enterprise space, you do dependency injection. And usually in Quarkus or Java EE, I would like to inject something with a field-based injection. Or if my project, for some reason, maybe the developer didn't agree with us, did do constructor-based injection, now we say, okay, please find all occurrences of this constructor-based injection in order to then change it. So this is kind of interesting. It means, okay, find any class that is maybe also annotated with something like application scope. So it is a bean in our enterprise context. And then also find a certain structure, for our case, a constructor that just does this. So in a very basic, you can find all the classes that have a constructor, but that is too much because we want only the special ones. And especially if we have a project with hundreds and hundreds of classes, then going through these occurrences might be otherwise quite cumbersome. So what we can do is to say, okay, please, to show you that, search structurally for anything that has a constructor. So let's do this, class constructors, for example. That's that. It looks a little bit weird, but if you read through it, okay, that structure of a class with then some parameters, so not really a method, but, well, a constructor. We say find this, okay, cool. It does find it, but also it finds my entity bean that is just my coffee here, that of course I don't want. That's just the default constructor. That's boring. It also finds my test code here. So not really the things that I want. It just finds all the classes that have a constructor, as I said. But now if I say, well, please find, and I prepared a few approaches here, please find something that has, well, this constructor-based injection. So I find a class, and not any class, but one that has an annotation, and I can also match for a text, for example, that is annotated with application scope. And now that has a field and does the field access in the constructor. So that will then find only one occurrence, which here is my coffee resource, because that's exactly the case. And then I could even go further and say, okay, please now also replace structurally this with that. I already prepared that for you to see that this also works. Of course, this then requires a bit more research in how this works. I will link you the documentation to IntelliJ, where all of these things are defined and what you can have here as so-called modifiers in order to select and see what you can do. But basically, that's something that can be helpful, especially for a bigger project. So if you have just let's say 10 occurrences, it probably doesn't make sense to find out how to write all of these things. You will just want to find them and then replace them manually. That's much faster. But if you have a huge project with hundreds of classes, this can really pay off. So for example, we want to search for the occurrences that we just had. We have one. And then replace it with, for example, my field injection of that field and delete the constructor. So let's do this. So it finds it again. I can say, okay, please preview the replacement. Okay, looks good. Please replace it. And now we see that it got replaced with this injection. Well, we could have changed it to a proper qualifier import, and that's that. And now we have the field-based injection as we wanted, or if you're in that camp, you can do it vice versa, of course. Depends on what you want to use. But that's quite helpful. The structural search, a quite complex feature, especially in order to master it and to find out things. But if you work in these huge enterprise projects and you would like to find out certain information about, well, what this looks like, certain code structures, this can be really helpful and especially can facilitate then some migrations. Either you do them with this find and replace or you do them in some other way, but just to find this information is a really cool feature. So structural search, another interesting thing that you probably didn't know about. Also, what is helpful and not that known is a dependency structure matrix called Analyze Dependency Matrix. This is about, well, either whole project or whatever you would like to analyze. So let's open up this, which here, fortunately, is a little bit small. It shows you, and I don't even have too many classes, looks a little bit weird in the beginning, but it's actually quite simple. It shows which class uses which. So if you press on it, you see, okay, which one is actually in use here. So for example, you see the coffee resource uses the coffee shop here, well, basically in 7 occurrences. So that looks all good. It would be interesting if we have, so that's a matrix, if we have a counter usage on the other side. If we say, okay, there is actually something like a cyclic dependency and you see a certain legend here, you can basically analyze, okay, what is being used where. Again, this structure is very simple, but you already see that, for example, the coffee shop and also my coffee entity bean is quite heavily in use by a few based on the structure here. So for a bigger project, of course, this would be more. And we see also the package structure, which here is straightforward because I pretty much only have this one domain package. But if you have multiple ones, then also you see the dependency there, which can be quite interesting. So that's called dependency matrix. Just go to the actions and say analyze dependency matrix. Typically for the project that you have here, a quite interesting feature that might help you. What is also pretty cool that you probably know, maybe know, likely know if you use databases a lot, that is a database browser, which is actually quite a powerful one. So it actually means, if I go to database, to especially my database view, it means that you don't need really any other database browser. If I say I have a local Postgres database, let me just stop and add this for you again. I say I want to add a data source and we have all sorts of stuff available. I say I have a local database running as a Docker container, which I will show you in a second, which just uses this default Postgres password. I can add this here and it will open up a console for me, or I can open up this myself. I can explore what is available here. Right now it's actually empty. What is that? It is a database that I started as a Docker container, and that actually uses some classes and tables in my coffee shop application. So let me quickly start this up with my Quarkus dev. So in order to start up the database and create some classes and some structure. So then it will actually just refresh this. It will create a table for my coffee orders, which then I can use and show in my console. So for example, you can do whatever you want. Select, let's say, version from Postgres and execute this, and it will have the results here. And now I can say, okay, select from coffee orders, of course, auto completion. We see, okay, cool, that's the table, it's empty. So I'm just gonna use the structure for adding, let's see, a coffee to my application. You can check out the code on GitHub if you're interested in that, but it's actually not that interesting. It just does a database access with my coffee shop here. It uses the coffee repository to store something for the coffee orders with a certain type. But now if I go to my database console and execute this, I can actually see what's going on here. I also, of course, can use a specific syntax from whatever I'm using here, Postgres, for example. So this knows also about the type of database and things like that. It has an auto-completion. The console editor that I can start, or I can start multiple ones, is quite helpful. So I can try out my SQL scripts here. And I can go to the result and then further use it and say, okay, please sort by it. It's almost like like a small Excel table. I can say, please filter here for just the espressos and things like that. Please generate a DDL based on what you see here. So all sorts of helpful stuff that basically makes you not need any other database browser. So the database browser that is included here, I've used this at times quite extensively for database access and for trying out stuff, is really helpful. So just search for database and you will find this, and the same is true for other data sources and things you might need here. There is also a full text search that is available here. If I go to my database view and say, on the tools full text search, I say I would like to search full text everywhere here and say, okay, where is the espresso, something like that. And it will generate the like statements here. For example, for, well, ID doesn't really make sense, but if I had multiple fields, it will generate this for me. And then I have the SQL script already available in which I can search through my database. So just very helpful tools and things that I can use directly in IntelliJ. There is no need for another tool. So that's pretty nice here as well. Another integration that can be quite helpful, I sometimes use this just for an overview, is the Docker integration. So if I go to a Docker for the connection, I use here my local Docker installation. I'm on Linux, so that's quite easy. I go here and see, okay, I have a Docker available. I cannot zoom here, but you can watch this on full HD, the video, where I have a Docker container that is running available that shows my log. And here, for example, that shows the image or a dashboard for this container with the environment variables, ports, volumes, overviews, things like that. If I had some old containers, then it could just remove them. So if I say I have something like Docker run Debian, what is available? Let's see. Oh, actually, I can check this in my IDE. What is available for Debian images? I could say, okay, have a look here and go to a particular Debian image. So I have Debian 12 available. I start a container from this. I say create a container with a particular launch, or, well, sometimes I use this feature, or I say, okay, please just Docker run from my command line. If I say, please run this real quick, and then it starts it again, it should now appear here also under my, 1 second, it should appear here under my container name that just has been stopped. So for example, I can have a look at them, and usually you have quite a few, and I say, please clean up all the stopped containers, remove them. So that's a very helpful feature. Or have a look at my image by which I started my container and see which images I have available, show the layers, push something here. So that's pretty cool just to examine stuff. Of course, all of that can be done on a command line using Docker or using any other tools, but just that it's available and integrated here in IntelliJ is also a helpful tool. So the Docker integration can be quite nice for just seeing what's going on here. And we have a look at the containers that are running, and we can control pretty much everything, but I usually use it as an overview over what's available. So that's also a helpful feature, the Docker integration. And last but not least, also what IntelliJ is able to do, IntelliJ can do HTTP calls. It has a built-in HTTP client, so you don't need to write even any script or find out the curl commands. You can just say, if I want to do an HTTP call, I can go to the HTTP client. I can say, okay, have a look at here, or just create a new request. Let's say I have my application running at 8080. Of course, it has an auto completion because it sees that this is my project. Cool. I say that's that. Please execute this request, and it will show me the response. So I have my coffee orders that I just created before, and it also saved the response here in a JSON file that actually resides under your idea directory. And I saved my request that is also under scratches. So that's kind of cool. I can rename this. I say, okay, a list orders or list coffees. And then I say, please create a coffee order. What I did before in the command line, I can say, please do this. For example, HTTP client, create a new request, either in the same HTTP file, or I say, please create a new file for it. So whatever you prefer here, I can say, okay, cool, coffees. And now that's not a get, but a post. I have a certain content type. So I say content type application JSON. Again, you see that it has a syntax highlight. And here it knows about a JSON. So again, syntax highlight and auto completion. You can say that should be espresso, or let's say that's going to be a latte, a new one. And then I can run this particular request. It tells me, okay, cool, 201 created with that particular location. I can now create a new request for this, or say, please run that request again. Now I have two results, and the later one shows me the latte as well that I just created. That's kind of cool because I can save this now here. That's saved in my local project file or project IntelliJ files. And then I have this available. I can share this with colleagues, and I can just see, okay, what's going on. And especially I can invoke it directly in IntelliJ. I don't need to have the knowledge of how to do this in a command line or create some Java code and things like that. Of course, that's helpful also for other reasons, but it's just integrated there right away. HTTP client, you don't need anything else. Okay, so these were my 13 cool IntelliJ features that you probably, hopefully didn't know yet. So I hope you learned something new. Let me know in the comments down below which one was your favorite. Also let me know in the comments if you have another one that is sort of like lesser known that might surprise me or you or somebody else for an IntelliJ feature. And if you're more interested in the topic of productive software development with IntelliJ, but also in general for all developers, then check out a video course that I have on the topic, link in the description down below. And I hope this was helpful and hopefully fun to watch. And as always, thanks a lot for watching and have a great day. Bye.